Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Cabinet. Before we begin, just a polite reminder to all those attending in the room that the Council continues to maintain a policy on wearing face masks indoors, unless you are exempt. There was non-compliance at the previous Cabinet meeting, so I would ask for the safety of all of the attendees of the meeting, both our staff and councillors, that that rule is observed. You may remove your face mask when speaking, but you must return them to your face once you have concluded speaking. Apologies for absence.
Councillor Elwall.
Thank you, and we have Councillor Costigan joining us in hybrid style. There are no urgent matters, declarations of interest. No declarations of interest. The matters to be considered private are as they are listed. Minutes of the previous meeting, are they agreed? Agreed. No appointments to subcommittees or outside bodies, so we move to the meat of the agenda, the Council Performance Report Q1. As Cabinet will be aware, we take this report every quarter to consider the Council's performance against its key performance indicators. All future performance reports will be presented to Cabinet in my name. However, I'm going to give each Cabinet member the opportunity to speak briefly on their key performance indicators in turn before opening up to questions, which I believe we have from opposition members. So first up is Councillor Blacker.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just draw Cabinet's attention to a couple of them. One of the red ones under Healthy Lives indicator. I don't have the reference for it, apologies. The number of social care referrals from the contact centre is vastly above target, but this isn't really a measure of the Council's own performance, but a measure of the demand being placed upon us. I am pleased to say that if we look at what is a measure of our actual performance in relation to that, the turnaround time of assessments, we are performing slightly better than the target of 100 days at 91 days. I think we will have opportunity to discuss social care reforms next week at full council, and I would just remind members that when we talk about that demand coming in, the government's own notes from the recent announcement suggested we need to manage that within our existing resources and did not provide any further resource to deal with demographic pressures.
Councillor Nagpal.
Sorry, Chair, I was just trying to find where my mic was. So if I start with the percentage of education, health and care plans, which is red. So this performance is set within the context of the pandemic lockdowns, which caused unusual bulges in referrals linked to school attendance. A national survey with 115 local authorities reporting their data to August 2021 reported average performance of 58% of education, health and care plans issued on time. So again, reflecting on the challenges brought by the pandemic. So in this context, Ealing has performed well in Q1 at 74.3%. And the team are also dealing with a rise in the number of plans and complexity of children and young people presenting with additional needs. Ealing has issued 300 education and health and care plans over the last 12 months, which is a rise in 10% compared to the previous 12 months. And the biggest rise is the need for young children under 5 and for young people 11 to 15. Again, both critical development stages. And then if I turn to the KPIs, which are green and amber. So percentage of 16 to 17-year-olds not in education, employment or training. I mean, we've made great progress and a reflection of great schools and focused work to support all young people into education, employment and training. So that's green, hence that's green. And the two KPIs that are amber, which relate to looked after children, again, continued focus of brighter futures to keep children safely at home and recognise, this is a challenging, it's challenging given the impact of COVID, and recent changes also reflect the increase in unaccompanied minors. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. So under decent living incomes, I can happily contribute not just one, not two, but three green targets that we have achieved as a local authority. And as we know that our residents are facing this precipice of the cliff edge of the reduction in UC, universal credit payments of £20 a week and the ending of furlough, it is ever more important that we step in as a local authority to support our residents get into good quality jobs. And these three targets are showing that we are doing exactly that in the first quarter of this year. And that's number of residents supported to gain work or better work, number of qualifications and training programs, again, overachieved, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And importantly, we've grown the number of London living wage employers by over a third in that quarter as well. So just a little bit about the training. Just wanted to specifically point out about the Hgv training that we've been doing and the close work that we've been working with Green Reeling, where we have not only the number of local residents who are currently training, but we also have the connectivity between that training and the jobs that will be there on the other side. So the opportunity for them to, once they've completed that training, go into jobs either with Green Reeling or with other key contractors that we work with. And of course, I'll just finish on this point. It's not one that's in the report, but is a manifesto pledge delivered, and that is one around apprenticeships. In 2018, we set out to have an ambitious target of 750 apprenticeships across our borough, and we have delivered on that number over 6 months early, with 761 delivered.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Quite thin, slim pickings from me, as most of my KPIs are awaiting data, but I would draw Cabinet's attention to, on table 3, the sick absence figures, where our sick absence for our employees has gone down and is operating ahead of our target. And I'd like to pay tribute to our staff, not just for that, but for all the work, of course, that they have done for us. I think also it reflects the wisdom of the approach that we've taken as an employer in terms of return to work, the slogan gradual and careful and voluntary, which I would commend to all other employers, because otherwise we're just storing up trouble for ourselves for the future.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Donnelly. You pointed to an important point, which of course is that there are a number of key performance indicators that don't yet have data, but will have in future performance reports. But Councillor Manro will be covering genuinely affordable homes today. So Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. There's 4 indicators, 2 green and 2 red. I actually want to talk about the green indicators first of all, which is the percentage of homeless applications prevented through early intervention and number of families in bed and breakfast. Whilst they're both green, we are looking at a really heavy cliff edge in terms of the universal credit cut, which my councillor Mahfouz already pointed out, and also the end of furlough. So what that will mean is we are now seeing the courts processes now going through evictions. That's restarted. The council did pass a motion at the last council meeting around us asking government to prevent this cliff edge from occurring, and I'd like to know, Councillor Stafford, how you voted, but we are looking at a major ramp up in the number of families presenting themselves to us as homeless within the next 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a bit longer. I'll run up to Christmas. Many families are going to be evicted through the court process, and will a loss of income through universal credit, rent arrears, etc. All of those have been pending. Now they're all coming through the system. So we are looking at a fairly large increase coming forward. So I would just point out, although they're green at the moment, we will be, I would say, looking at a real change in those 2 indicators. But we are where we are. The government's not helping us and hasn't really taken account of what that's going to do to many of our families in the borough. The other one, which are red, whilst they're red, it is around slippage of our registered providers, and we feel that we will catch up with them by the end of this year. Registered providers going onto ground and providing affordable homes. We are actually at 85% of our target of 2,500, but we haven't quite met the target in Q1 in terms of those two indicators, but it is a slippage from Q1 into Q2. We think our RPs will catch up, and obviously Broadway Living, we've had the same issue. The issue has been around COVID. The issue has been around many of our developers sourcing materials. There's been a massive shortage of products that they need to build with. The cost increases have been massive, and also a lack of suitably skilled staff is also been an issue, but they are working their way through it, and we think our RPs will be able to manage and get through to Q2. So we should catch up with those targets later on this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Raza.
So I'd like to draw attention to table 4 first and deal with the red indicators first. And as Councillor Nagpal pointed out, that this is all backdrop is with the context of COVID that has affected quite a lot of these. So with the rates of incidence of violence, that's not come down as we'd expected or wanted to. That's something that obviously we'd asked for more resourcing from policing, and it's been seen fit to actually put that resourcing in Uxbridge and also in Hounslow, and we found that there's very little that's come Ealing's way. So we're in the process of trying to get a bit more resource on that front coming to our borough. And the first time an entrance to youth justice system, again, our youth have really suffered during the COVID lockdowns, and for a lot of that, I think the numbers that we're seeing with violence, and particularly youth violence, and coming into our youth justice system has been quite different in what would have been in normal years. But on the upside, I think that things that we've seen in the table indicating things in red, in green, have shown that the incidence of domestic abuse we're doing a bit better on, and rates and incidents of knife crime have also we've done a bit better on as well. This is also because there's been a huge concerted effort on our part to make sure that knife crime was addressed with our young people and actually across the population. So I think that that will improve and continue to improve as well. But the big news, the good news story is the percentage of our young offenders that are engaged in suitable education and training. We've done amazingly well with our young people who are actually getting back into the system, and 100% figure there is looking pretty good to me. So I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Costigan.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at the climate action performance indicators, there are 4 that focus on street cleanliness, and the great news is that of those 4, 3 of them are currently green, and those are the percentage of streets that are free of detritus, the percentage of streets that are free of litter, and the percentage of streets that are free of fly posting. We're performing in the mid-90s to the high 90s for all 3 of those. So I think that is a great testament to our Greener Ealing team. So thank you to all the work that they're doing. The one area in street cleansing where we haven't quite hit the target, we're still in the 90%, but we're not quite at the target. And that is a percentage of streets that are free, or sorry, the percentage of streets are free of graffiti. That one, we're a little bit below target. But this does seem to be reflecting a London-wide issue where there seems to have been a bit of a spike in graffiti. I'm not sure if it's, you know, if during lockdown people had more time to go and paint the walls. I'm not quite sure what the reason is, but there does seem to be a bit of a spike, and it is across West London and across London. But actually, I should stress that this indicator actually measures reported graffiti in the borough. So it doesn't actually reflect on the service the council provides, which is the removal of graffiti. So actually our removal of graffiti is still performing within the service level agreement. So we are still doing a really good job on removing the graffiti. It's just more and more of it is going up. So we do need to keep an eye on that and try and see what we can do to pull that back in again. The other area that I just wanted to draw colleagues' attention to is the performance indicator around the percentage of waste that is reused, recycled or composted. And that is below the target that we were hoping to have achieved at this stage. We're just below the 50% mark, which is still really good and actually is better than a lot of our neighbouring boroughs in West London. But something seems to have happened during the pandemic, which is a London-wide issue. With more people working from home, it appears that their their living habits have changed, and what they do with their rubbish seems to have changed a bit. So there is a stagnation in recycling, reuse and composting across London. What we are doing is we're doing some work with West London Waste to see if we can actually have a look at the composition of the residual waste, so the black bin, what people put in their black bin, to try and find out what is it that's happening and what are people putting in their black bins that's causing this issue. We think that probably food waste is going to be a big part of it, that people are putting food waste into their black bin, and with more people living at home, so working from home rather, there is increased food waste, and that is unfortunately going into the residual. But we're already ahead of the game. We are already doing work on this. We have rolled out a new programme of food waste where we're going to properties who aren't currently participating in the food waste service that we offer in Ealing, and we've delivered caddies to all of those homes. We've delivered free liner sacks and also leaflets explaining how to take part in the food waste service. So we're really hopeful that that will see an uplift in the performance. And added to that, we're about to roll out a new recycling from flats initiative, food waste rather, from flats initiative. So that will be starting within the next few weeks as well. So with both of those kind of proactive attempts to get people to stop putting the food waste in their residual waste, we hope that we will get back on track with this indicator, and we can, over the next year or so, move forward to seeing our recycling, composting, and reuse go back up again. Of course, I should just say that doesn't mean that all the rest of our waste is going to landfill, because I think sometimes residents think that. In fact, we have a great story on that. We send almost nothing to landfill. It's a tiny percentage, and it's only if the waste gets contaminated. For example, it went on fire. That would be kind of the only reason it would go to landfill. What we do with the rest of our waste is it goes to an energy from waste facility. So we do actually extract energy from the rest of our waste that doesn't go to recycling. However, we're not saying that's sufficient. We know that what we now need to do is move on to what's called the circular economy, and actually try and discourage people from having waste in the first place. So reducing the use of packaging, but also looking at reusing much more than we currently do. So that's work that we're going to be focusing on in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Costigan. And now to request to speak from Councillor Malcolm first.
Thank you, Chair. On the recycling rate, this stagnation that was just mentioned then has actually been going on for 4 years, not just the 2 years of COVID. And I welcome some of the plans that you've mentioned to widen recycling, because that is what we've needed for a few years to come. The two questions I've got relate to different areas of recycling and reporting of issues. The first one relates to garden waste. There seems to be a problem where people are reporting to me that they've wanted to sign up to the garden waste scheme, but they've been waiting weeks and weeks and weeks and still haven't received the containers, yet they've had the money taken from their accounts. So I'd like to know what is the reason for this, and what is the time span that people can expect to receive their containers, because it's meant to be within 5 days. My second question relates to the reporting of environmental crimes, environmental issues rather, via the app. So we all, councillors and residents, are encouraged to do that, and I do that regularly. However, about 10%, from what I understand, the address is not taken with it through IT issues, and therefore the resident gets back a feedback message to say that graffiti has been fixed, it's been removed almost immediately, when we know that can't be done within a few hours. When I've gone back to visit some of these examples of leaves, of litter, of fly tips, I find again and again that many of them are not removed because of this issue. So can I ask, when will this app be fixed so that it works 99.9% of the time rather than 90% or so? Because that is an issue, because a lot of people have given up using it now. So I think we really need to fix this as a priority.
Now, I'm sure Councillor Malcolm hasn't waited for a cabinet before reporting that clearly technical issue through to the officer call, but nevertheless, Councillor Costigan, do you want to respond?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Malcolm. Really just kind of basically repeat what the Chair has said, you know, very much ready to look into any particular issues that individual residents may have around the garden waste if they've signed up and they haven't yet received their bin. But, you know, I'm certainly available if you just send me an email and give me the details of anyone who hasn't received their bin, and I can make sure that is sorted out. On the app, the Love Clean Streets app, I use it myself all the time. I think it's great. Anytime I walk, you know, anywhere in the borough, I always have it ready, and sometimes I end up being late for stuff because I've taken pictures and made sure that I have put in the address of where I have seen the environmental issue. And I do make sure there is a section on the app that allows you to actually input the address. So the app uses GPS to ascertain where you're at, but you can also type in the address yourself. And I do that all the time to make sure the address is correct. I'm not aware of the issue that you've raised, Councillor Malcolm. It hasn't been raised with me. So certainly if you could just email me and let me know any particular issues that haven't been acted on, then I can make sure that that's sorted. Thank you.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. First questions I have are in the same portfolio, Councillor Costigan's. First of all, the recycling target. As Councillor Malcolm has just said, this, and he called it stagnation, but actually the figures are getting worse, have been getting worse over the last 4 years. I welcome the measures to bring in food recycling at flats, etc., and I'm pleased to see that's coming in soon. But you know, the simple fact is, if you make it easier for people to recycle, they will recycle. So can you give us an update on the closure of Acton Dump? Has this now closed? When is it going to close if it hasn't? And will, if it hasn't closed, you reconsider the decision on that and perhaps make that a beacon of where people could take their food waste, should their caddies be full because of extra consumption and extra usage of food waste at home during the lockdown period. Secondly, on the graffiti target, I don't think Councillor Costigan mentioned it, but it sounded slightly flippant, her response about graffiti, but obviously it's quite literally a stain on our borough. And whilst I accept that the service level agreement may be complied with, what proactive measures is the council taking to identify graffitiing hotspots and to rectify them, even if they're not reported by residents? And finally, on litter and detritus, I've said this on a number of occasions, but the results that this report shows year in, year out bears little resemblance to what residents are reporting to us as local councillors. I mean, I take my own road where the weeds, despite it being October, are over knee height in some places. The fact that, you know, you can walk down plenty of our roads in our borough and it's absolutely filthy. The fact that, you know, I've done a number of litter picks with the great organisation Lagercan over the last months or so, and we are collecting tons and tons. So I just don't believe those figures. What are we doing to check that those figures are accurate? Then on generally affordable homes, very quick questions. How many generally affordable homes are actually completed during the period of this report? And how many do they expect to be completed by May 2022? And finally, I would want to end on a positive note, which is I think that what the council has done on apprenticeships is absolutely excellent. And I want to congratulate the portfolio holder and the officers for bringing in the apprenticeships. And I'm very pleased that some of those apprentices will be standing as Conservative councillors next year.
Well, I think, you know, if that was intended to surprise us, I think, Councillor Stafford, we've got a few surprises for you. Councillor Costigan, do you want to address those questions first?
Were they questions or was it a party political broadcast? I'll just go to the main points, which I think were genuine questions. So that was a question about food waste and whether people would be better off going to the tip with their food waste. I think, like I said, we are focusing on taking climate action and we don't want people driving all over the borough with food waste when we've got a perfectly good curbside food waste collection service. So people should put their food waste in the caddies that we have, like I say, made sure that we've extended to even more homes in the borough and will also be extending to flats. In terms of the Acton Recycling Centre, we have gone through this on numerous occasions now, and I think their arguments have been rehearsed. It's a very, very inefficient site. We are one of the only boroughs in London that had 2 sites, and because we're part of the West London Waste Authority, residents can go to any of the sites in the West London Waste Authority, many of which are closer than Acton, and it is closing at the end of the year. Just to clarify that. In terms of graffiti, I think as I said, we are performing in line with the SLA, so we are removing graffiti once it appears. So that is, you know, the key thing I think that residents want to know, that graffiti is removed. In terms of actually stopping people, you know, spray painting, that's obviously a more difficult job, and it's a bit like the job of re-education to stop people littering the borough. It's a small minority of people who take part in this kind of behaviour, but it is something we're looking at because, like I say, with the spike in graffiti across London, I think we do need to focus more on prevention. So that is something we're looking at, but it's not going to be an easy job in the same way as stopping people dropping litter isn't an easy job. It is about education. And I think the final question then I think the councillor had was around the performance indicators. And questioning the validity of those performance indicators. Councillor Stafford, those are government statistics. The government actually goes around and does this work to look at the percentage of streets that are clear of detritus and litter. So it is the government, which I think last time I checked was run by his party, that it has gathered these statistics and has found that Ealing is doing really well. Thank you very much on these indicators. That being said, I do recognise that in particular this year, the weather that we've had has meant that weeds have grown back much quicker than they normally would. We go around the borough where we spray the weeds on a rota, so we have to go across the whole borough over a certain number of weeks. We spray all the weeds and then we go back 2 weeks later and we dig out the dead weeds. So all of that takes a certain amount of time. And this year with the kind of the rain and then the sun and the rain again, basically weeds have grown back much quicker. So there has been some growth that we might not have seen previously. But that being said, our teams have come back again, like I said, on a rota, sprayed them all again, and then come back 2 weeks later and dug them out. So the work has been done and streets are being cleared of the weeds, but we are up against the weather and, you know, weeds grow. It's in their nature. Thanks.
Always wonderful to be told by your official opposition that you're making streets clean, as Councillor Costigan has so clearly set out, and that we're delivering on apprenticeships. But Councillor Manray, do you want to talk about genuine affordable homes?
I just wondered whether I should just read the report because the numbers are there. So I really don't. Well, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to build a damn thing. So how do I know? I mean, it does take, you know, it's.
Sorry, Chair, it's inaccessible for people who are in this meeting on a hybrid basis if people are shouting across the chamber without going through the chair. Yeah, I can't hear what's being said.
Yeah, and I would remind, you know, this isn't this isn't full council, this is the cabinet meeting. So I think what we're effectively saying, Councillor Stafford, is of course there will be completions. Those numbers will, I'm certain, be released very shortly in the authority monitoring report and in other forms. You know, equally, we also bring a genuinely affordable housing update paper at least once a quarter. So I know that you've been absent for a significant number of cabinet meetings over the last year, but certainly if you do read your papers, you will know precisely where to find that information. I think the point that Councillor Manner is trying to make is, thank you. The point that Councillor Manner is trying to make is that it takes a significant amount of time to build a house. You don't just plonk them out the sky. We set ourselves a target 2,500 genuinely affordable at the beginning of the 2018 administration. And my understanding is that we are, if not in the high 80 percentile, we're certainly in the low 90. So watch this space as you see more of those numbers come through. And unless there's any more, we're going to move on to the next cabinet agenda item, which is the budget strategy and medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. The paper is one of our regular updates. In a sense, it will look very familiar to Cabinet colleagues in that we are still no nearer knowing what our financial position will be for next year, let alone for the 3 years covered in the medium-term financial strategy, because the government has made no announcements about the position of local government moving forward. So the normal uncertainty pertains. In fact, perhaps one of the most concerning updates within the paper relates to social care, which is kind of piling uncertainty upon uncertainty. Colleagues will be aware that a month or so back, the government, after an enormous fanfare and anticipation, released almost no information in its so-called master plan for social care. Nothing about capacity, nothing about quality of provision, nothing about the pay for those who would provide care to those in need, nothing about where those people will come from. The only announcement that was made was the usual short-termist stuff, which was an announcement about a cap of £86,000 on care payments, which is fine and welcome as far as it goes. What it then didn't go on to say was what happens from £86,001 onwards. So where at the moment councils are in receipt of payments relating to those receiving care, that clearly, from what we can read, can't now happen. And we know nothing about the whys, wherefores and the hows of how we will be recompensed for service that we provide moving forward, whether that'll be directly or indirectly, whether we'll be expected to shoulder, and this would be typical of the way the current government works, in some underhand way, some element of the funding that currently we have been compensated for. So it's not a very cheerful picture for the medium term. There's nothing in this to make us, I think, optimistic moving forward, but I will continue to keep colleagues updated as and when information comes our way.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much. Just some questions on paragraph 4.5.1, which is about the procurement of Newton Europe to do work for the council at a cost of nearly £500,000. Can I ask, given that they've been working for the council, and I thank the officer for providing me with this information beforehand, between August and December, so they are 3/4 of their way almost through their tenure with us. What financial savings have they achieved for that nearly £500,000? Is the council likely to continue this form of either contracting Newton Europe or a similar organisation in after December or in years to come? And why did the council not feel that it had the capacity, either in terms of the numbers of people or in terms of the competency of those people, within the relevant departments to find those savings themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Stafford. On your first question, Cabinet will, in the first instance, consider the feedback that comes from Newton and will make decisions about what and how quickly to seek to capture proposals that Newton make, and that information will clearly come into the public domain for you to review. As far as what we'll do in the future, you know, I don't have a crystal ball. I have every expectation that we will see very good value from the investment we're making into Newton, that we will do far more than get our money back from them, and that the investment of up to a little under £500,000 to which he refers will recoup money in the millions rather than merely in the hundreds of thousands. Whether we do this again with Newton or with other people will very much depend on circumstances and our judgment as to whether or not it's likely to represent good value to the residents of Ealing. Moving on to the third point about capacity and competency, our officers are more overstretched than they've ever been because of increasing demand at a time of declining resources. We are very competent officers, and at the same time, everybody understands that from time to time, it's good to have somebody from outside look at what we do and to have the humility to understand that there may be good practice elsewhere or different practice that we can bring to bear to our own benefit and the benefit of the people that we serve. And I don't think anybody within the council is embarrassed or annoyed about that. So we're making the best use of the resource that we have to the best benefit of the people of Ealing, and I would hope that Councillor Stafford would support such an undertaking.
Yeah, indeed, and I'd sort of reiterate those comments. You know, there's absolutely no embarrassment whatsoever. Sometimes it's very good to get new ideas from other people, from outside organisations. Councillor Stafford, I just wish you would offer some new ideas every once in a while. And I do struggle. You know, we may be a new administration, but Councillor Stafford, you've been the leader of the opposition for a considerable period of time, and you've been through multiple budget rounds. You've been through multiple performance indicator and MTFS rounds, and you will know full well that we have, for a significant period of time, because of the dual challenges of austerity imposed by your government and the need to bring in those experts who do have that ability to bring in new ideas, that we've appointed similar organisations in the past. And this is a pretty standard process of our future budget setting and MTFS setting process. So with that, Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Yeah, following on from a couple of the earlier questions, can the portfolio hold a guarantee that we will not lose out if any of these suggestions, plans, proposals put forward? As mentioned, we won't lose out by having to pay the contractor if we don't achieve decent savings.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by guarantee, Councillor Malcolm. I'm not personally underwriting it in that sense. As I said to you, we are already, I think I could put it, we're already confident that the work that Newton are doing is generating and will generate savings well in excess of what we're spending. So, you know, if that's what you mean by a guarantee, then I will give you that guarantee.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is the root and branch review of the arboricultural services contract. Councillor Costigan.
Thanks, Chair. You just couldn't resist that, could you? Yes, this is
I'm so sorry.
arboricultural tender report, which is to do with trees, basically. So it includes tree pruning and other works on our trees. And this is a standard, basically, agreement to ask the assistant director to put these contracts, they're divided into lots 1 to 5, out to tender, because our current contract reaches a point at the end of this year, where we have to decide whether to extend it or not. And for these particular lots 1 to 5, the current contractor is not performing to the standards that we would wish in order to extend the contract. So we therefore want to re-tender that contract at this point. And the report basically delegates authority to advertise and evaluate bids to the Assistant Director, and then delegates authority to authorise an award of those lots to myself as the Cabinet member. I'll leave it at that because there may be some questions that I can deal with.
I believe Councillor Malcolm has a question, but I'm certain Councillor Malcolm won't use Cabinet's time to raise matters of casework, which I'm sure he can email Councillor Costigan if that's an issue in his ward.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Well, casework is what we should be listening to find out what problems are around the borough or what things are working. There have, over many months, been issues with tree pruning and basal growth removal, which I do support the removal of this particular contractor. Is there a way to remove them earlier than just not allowing them to extend the contract? Because it seems to me the problems I've seen from speaking to officers is that contractor is blaming the council, and the council is then not managing the contractor probably to the most effective way, in a similar way to what happened over the past few years with Amy. Is there a way to remove them earlier than the end of the current schedule? Because really the reports that I'm getting is that the wards that I see are just being left in such a bad way. We need to take action now.
Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. I think you're referring to Southfield Ward in particular, but just to kind of respond on your initial point there about casework, and it's certainly very important that we listen to casework, but I think the Chair's point was that we don't need to wait until the next Cabinet meeting to raise casework. I think most councillors try and raise a casework once it comes into them, rather than waiting until a Cabinet meeting, and they're kind of like 6 weeks or 2 months apart. However, in relation to this particular issue, what we have done is, in order to try and address the performance issues of the current contractors, we did bring in another contractor, particularly in one of the wards that you've mentioned, to see if we could address some of the issues. But in fact, their performance has not been good enough either. So that has been an issue. However, we now have got assurances that all the work in Southfields Ward in particular will be completed shortly. So that will be sorted out. The issues that the councillor has raised will be sorted out. However, it does bring home the fact that we need to certainly re-tender this contract straight away, and that's why we're bringing this paper to Cabinet tonight. And I think it's also very important that going forward we make sure that we factor performance very much into that contract. So there's very clear service level agreements with future contractors as to the level of service that Ealing would expect for the council taxpayers' money that we are paying out. So I'll certainly give that commitment that we're going to make sure that there will be strong service level agreements and that performance will be very much a key part of the contract. But I think the point that the councillor raises just underlines the reason why we need to bring this report tonight, and we need to get this contract re-tendered. Thank you.
Update on schools, places and children's services capital approvals. Councillor Nagpal.
Thank you, Chair. So there are 4 aims of this report. Firstly, to provide Cabinet with an update on the school places position across the borough. Cabinet usually receives this update each October. So at primary phase, overall numbers have declined since the peak we had in the mid-2010s. And at secondary phase, where numbers have been increasing but are expected to peak this year, there does remain pressure in some areas of the borough, such as Southall. And then the special education needs, where numbers have been increasing significantly across the borough. Secondly, to add government grant to the capital programme that has been allocated to the council to fund capital projects to meet the increased demand for SEND places. Thirdly, there's been an increase in the school's condition allocation grant to the council this year. and the additional funding requires approval by Cabinet to add to the capital programme. Finally, to add a special needs places project, which is Elthorne Park High School's expansion of its additionally resource provision to the capital programme to provide more ARP places to meet the demand for places. The school is contributing 700,000 to the project to add additional mainstream accommodation to the project to help with classroom space pressures on site following its expansion in 2016 and its outstanding Ofsted rating in 2019.
Okay, I didn't have any indications to speak on that agenda item. So what we're going to do is for all of the items, where are we, 7 through 10 contain recommendations with delegations and actions. Is Cabinet content to agree all of those recommendations in each of the reports?
Agreed.
Okay, so we now move on to agenda item 11, which is a report for noting. Councillor Blacker.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report from the LGO into a complaint that has been made against the council. We received that report from the LGO in August. And I'd ask Cabinet just to note that we have formally apologised to Ms. X. I think we would reiterate that apology this evening. We have paid her compensation, and I'd ask Cabinet to note the progress we've made towards the recommendations from the LGO in relation to what went wrong. I'd also just point out that at the moment the provider is suspended from receiving any new referrals from us pending the outcome of a contractual risk review into that agency.
Okay, I have had a request to speak. Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Yeah, the first question is, has this case highlighted any other providers who may have repeated something similar? Because the feedback loop of when someone makes a complaint isn't always quite so clear or isn't always as foolproof as it can be. So I wonder whether there's any other providers who may be providing a bad service or examples of it. And then secondly, I think paragraph 82 talks about the priority that this council didn't give when that initially was reported to them, which I know forms some of the actions that it's taken in the background over the past few months. Can you give more details of the training that has been given to make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen again?
Councillor Blacker.
Thanks. Yeah, we do conduct regular safeguarding reviews when we receive feedback, whether that's from care users, the families, and so on. And those do happen. I see them, we discuss them, and whatever actions need to be taken can and do get taken. We do suspend people from new referrals, and we move people off them as well when necessary. In terms of the training, there is some detail in the report in terms of the training that we've given in terms of kind of safeguarding team have had additional training. Some members have that left, and there is a new manager who's put in place additional systems to make sure we're working to Pan London guidelines as well.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much. Clearly, this is a very concerning report. Given that, especially given the failures of the care agency, the provider of the care that the council contracted, and I think especially I think it's paragraph 50 where it highlights that the essentially care agency falsified records and furthermore didn't keep records on a number of other occasions. I'm pleased to hear that there are no new referrals. Can the portfolio holder confirm how many existing referrals, if any, are with this provider? And if there are any still with this provider, what extra safeguarding measures are being put in place to ensure that other clients or service users, whatever the terminology you want to use, are being protected? Second of all, I'm pleased to see that actions have been taken where the council clearly has made errors. So, for example, the delay in investigation of this. But has there been a review of other complaints to ensure that they have been dealt with in an effective and efficient and timely manner? And if they haven't, can we see some statistics at some point on this? And the final point on this is, given the seriousness of this concern and complaint, would this service be something useful that scrutiny, either overview scrutiny or one of the scrutiny panels, could look at to ensure that members have full oversight of potential problems in this department?
I mean, you know, again, Councillor Stafford, you're a councillor who has long service to this council, and you will know that we take precisely that, an annual report to health scrutiny every year. So, you know, you do have representatives on that panel, so you already have that assurance, and it's not necessarily a question that you shouldn't know the answer to. But Councillor Blacker?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, Health and Adult Social Security Social Services panel sets its own agenda. I wouldn't want the administration to tell them what to look at. I know they did take a report on the care market in Ealing recently. And as Councillor Mason says, the complaints report, I think, goes to OSC actually every year alongside the children's now. So those two services can be looked at in the round. In terms of the specific care agency, obviously that care agency is not named in this report at the moment for obvious reasons. So I'd just ask you to liaise with officers on those numbers, just so that we don't put information in the public domain tonight that might identify Mrs. M and Ms. X, the daughter, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. No.
Hasn't really answered my question though, which was, are there any current?
Yeah, so Councillor Stafford, I think he has answered your question to the best of his ability on the basis of what information we would wish to put into the public domain this evening. If you wish to take up the matter with the Director of Children, Adults and Public Health after the meeting, you're very entitled to do that, and I'm sure we can give you that information, but we won't be releasing it into the public domain this evening. On that basis, the report is for noting, so can we note the report?
Noted. Great.
And you will have noticed I did something different this evening. In future, cabinet agendas will be split between what we consider to be key decisions that contain recommendations and reports that come forward for noting, so that there is that distinction on the cabinet agenda going forward. But with that, I just thank everybody for your attendance this evening, for officers for their reports, and confirm that the next agenda item or the next meeting will be on the 10th of November. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, Chair.